Captain Yeneth Kahl had spent 40 years picking through the bones of dead ships, but she had never felt fear like this before. The salvage vessel Quiet Prophet drifted through the dead corridor, a stretch of space that no sane creature entered willingly. 3,000 years ago, the First Galactic War had ended here, and the conquered assembly had declared this region forbidden. No patrols came here, no traders, no one at all. But Yeneth Kahl was not interested in laws when credits were involved. "Captain, I am detecting something strange," said Savith, her four-armed engineer, his voice trembling as he studied the scanner. "There is a vessel ahead, hidden in the gravitational shadow of that dead star." Kahl leaned forward in her command chair and narrowed her golden eyes. "Size?" "Massive, Captain, at least 3 kilometers long, and the design—" Savith stopped speaking and his scales turned pale. "What is it?" "The design is human." The bridge fell completely silent. Every crew member froze at their stations. Kahl felt her hearts begin to pound faster in her chest. Humans? The word alone carried weight that most species could not understand. The conquered had erased them from history books. Speaking of them was forbidden in many systems. Young species did not even know humans had ever existed. But the elder races remembered. They remembered and they feared. Kahl was old enough to have heard the whispered stories from her grandmother, creatures from a small blue world, soft bodies but iron wills. They had spread across the stars like wildfire, adapting to every world they touched. And then the First War came and humanity vanished forever. Or so everyone believed. "Bring us closer," Kahl commanded, ignoring the terror in her crew. Slowly. The Quiet Prophet crept toward the massive shadow. As they approached, the ship emerged from the darkness like a monster rising from deep water. It was gray and angular, covered in armor plates that still gleamed after 3 millennia. Strange symbols marked its hull, letters in a language that no translator could read anymore. But one phrase stood out, painted in letters taller than Kahl's entire ship. "UN Prometheus, Contingency Class." "What does contingency mean?" asked Dren, the young archivist who served as their researcher. His tentacles curled nervously around his data pad. "I do not know," Kahl admitted. "But look at the size of those weapon ports. Whatever this ship was built for, it was built to destroy." Savith worked frantically at his console. "Captain, I am reading power signatures. The ship is not dead. It runs on minimal energy, but its core is still active." "After 3,000 years, Kahl whispered in disbelief. "That is not the strangest part." Savith turned to face her, and his eyes were wide with fear. "I am detecting life signs, 12,000 of them, but they read as indeterminate, not alive, not dead, something in between." The crew began to panic. Several officers stood from their stations, ready to run, but Kahl raised her hand and silenced them. "Think about what we have found," she said carefully. "Human technology, intact, functioning. Do you understand what this is worth? We could buy entire planets with what we find on that ship." "Captain, the conquered made human space forbidden for a reason," Dren protested. "My grandmother told me stories. She said the humans became something terrible at the end. She said they stopped being human at all." "Grandmother stories," Kahl scoffed. "The war ended 3,000 years ago. Whatever happened then does not matter now. All that matters is the fortune waiting inside that hull." She gave the order to dock. The Quiet Prophet attached itself to an external airlock on the Prometheus. The seal was ancient but still functional, and atmosphere readings showed breathable air inside. Kahl gathered her boarding team, Savith, Dren, and 2 security officers named Torek and Ven. "Stay together," she ordered as the airlock cycled. "Take everything valuable, touch nothing that looks dangerous." The inner door opened with a hiss of ancient air, and darkness swallowed them. Kahl activated her helmet light and stepped forward. The corridor stretched ahead, coated in frost and utterly silent. The walls were lined with panels covered in human writing, and emergency lights flickered weakly in the distance. "It is cold," Dren whispered, "so cold." They walked deeper into the ship. Every step echoed in the silence. Kal noticed marks on the walls, scratches, dents, what looked like old burn marks from weapons fire. A battle had been fought here long ago. Then Torek stopped and pointed his light at the wall. "Captain, look at this." Words had been carved into the metal, deep grooves cut by desperate hands. The message was written in dozens of languages. Some Kal recognized, others she had never seen. But the translation was clear because someone had carved it in Concord Standard as well. "Do not wake them." Kal stared at the warning. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to return to her ship and flee this cursed place. But greed held her feet in place. She had come too far to leave empty-handed. "Keep moving," she ordered. They pressed forward until they reached a massive chamber. Kal gasped at what her light revealed. Pods, thousands upon thousands of pods stacked in rows that stretched beyond her vision. Each pod contained a shape, a human shape, frozen and still. Frost covered the glass, but she could see faces beneath. Men and women and even children, all suspended in perfect stillness. "They are not dead," Savith said, his voice barely a whisper. "But they are not alive either. The readings make no sense." Dren approached one of the pods and wiped away the frost. The face beneath was peaceful, almost beautiful, a young woman with dark hair and closed eyes. "What were you?" Dren asked the silent figure. "What did they do to you?" Kal felt the cold seeping through her suit. This was wrong. Everything about this place was wrong. The humans should be dust by now, their ship a crumbling ruin. Instead, they slept on, waiting in the dark for something. Then she saw it, a small red light blinking in the shadows at the far end of the chamber. It had not been active when they entered. She was certain of that. "We should leave," she said, her voice cracking. "Now." But before anyone could move, the light spread. Console after console flickered to life. A deep hum filled the chamber as ancient systems awakened after 3,000 years of silence. And somewhere in the darkness below, Kal heard something that made her blood freeze. A pod was opening. The pod opened with a hiss that echoed through the frozen chamber like a scream. Kal grabbed her weapon and aimed at the dark shape rising from within. Her crew scattered behind her, their lights dancing wildly across the walls. Fear had taken hold of them all. But the figure that emerged moved slowly, almost gently. It stepped out of the pod and stood in the dim red light, and Kal finally saw what a human looked like. It was tall and thin, wrapped in a black suit that seemed to absorb the light. Its skin was pale as snow, and its hair was dark and short. The face might have been handsome once, but something was deeply wrong with it. The smile was too wide, too calm, and the eyes were completely black, like two holes leading into empty space. "Hello," the creature said in perfect Concord Standard. "Thank you for coming. We have been waiting such a very long time." Torek fired his weapon. The energy bolt struck the human directly in the chest and did nothing at all. The creature looked down at the burn mark on its suit and then looked back up with that terrible smile. "That was not necessary," it said. "But I understand your fear. Please lower your weapons. I mean you no harm, not yet anyway." "What are you?" Kal demanded, keeping her weapon raised. "My name is Commander Elias Vance of the Contingency Division," the creature answered. "I am human, or at least I was human once. Now I am something more useful." "The war ended 3,000 years ago," Dren said, his voice shaking. "How are you still alive?" Vance tilted his head like a curious animal. "Alive is a complicated word, young one. We exist. We endure. Is that not enough?" He began walking toward a corridor, and somehow Kal found herself following. Her crew came with her, too terrified to be left alone in the dark. Vance led them deeper into the ship, past rows of sleeping pods that seemed to go on forever. "You want to understand," Vance said as they walked. "I can see the questions burning in your minds. So let me show you the truth that your conquered buried long ago. They entered a chamber filled with screens and terminals. Vance waved his hand and the machines hummed to life. Images appeared, cities burning, ships exploding, worlds dying. Kal watched in horror as the history of the First War unfolded before her eyes. "We came to the stars with hope," Vance narrated. "We wanted to explore, to learn, to make friends among the species we discovered. But your ancestors looked at us and saw only threat. They saw how fast we adapted, how quickly we spread, and they feared what we might become." The images showed 7 species meeting in secret, the founders of the conquered. Kal recognized her own people among them, and shame burned in her chest. "The Noble 7 decided that humanity must be destroyed," Vance continued. "Not defeated, not contained, destroyed completely. They attacked our colonies without warning. They burned our worlds and slaughtered our children. And when we fought back, when we began to win every battle, they became desperate." A new image appeared, scientists in a laboratory, working on something terrible. "They created a bioweapon," Vance said, and his voice carried a weight of ancient grief. "A plague designed to target human neural tissue. It spread through our population like fire. Billions died in weeks. We had no defense against it because it attacked our very biology." Kal felt sick. This was not the history she had been taught. The conquered records claimed the humans had been aggressors, monsters who threatened galactic peace. But this was genocide. "We were dying," Vance said. "Our species faced extinction, so we made a choice. If we could not survive as we were, we would transform into something that could not be killed. Something that would wait until the galaxy forgot its fear. Something that would remind them of what they did." He led them to another chamber, and Kal screamed at what she saw. The room was filled with tanks containing specimens from every conquered species. Organs floated in preservation fluid. Surgical tables held the remains of things that had been taken apart and studied. Notes covered the walls, written in the human language. "We harvested the biology of our enemies," Vance explained. "We integrated their gifts into ourselves: regeneration, adaptation, enhanced senses, extended life. We became hybrids, monsters built from the very species that tried to destroy us." Dren found a terminal and began reading the files. His tentacles trembled as he scrolled through the data. "This is impossible," he whispered. "They rebuilt themselves at the genetic level. They removed their need for food, for sleep, for everything that makes a creature vulnerable. They turned themselves into living weapons." "We had no choice," Vance said, and for a moment something almost like sadness crossed his face. "They made us into this. We simply finished what they started." Kal found a final log entry and played it. A human woman appeared on screen, her eyes tired but determined. "If anyone finds this recording, know that we did not want this war," the woman said. "We only wanted to live, but they would not let us. So now we sleep buried in the dark places of the galaxy. We have encoded a trigger into our ships. When any conquered species boards our vessels, the awakening will begin. Let them forget us. Let them grow comfortable in their peace. And when they become bold enough to touch our tombs, we will rise. We will remind them why they feared the dark. This is not revenge. Revenge is for the living. This is simply completion. They made us into weapons, and weapons fulfill their purpose." The recording ended, and silence filled the chamber. Vance smiled that terrible smile again. "You see now, Captain. You were the trigger. Your presence here has activated the return protocol. Even now, a signal is spreading across this region of space." "What signal?" Kal asked, already knowing the answer. "A wake-up call," Vance replied. "There are 67 contingency vessels hidden in the dead corridor. Your arrival has begun the process of waking them all. In a matter of days, our fleet will be complete." Kal turned and ran for the airlock. Her crew followed, their feet pounding against the metal floor. But when they reached the dock, they found the door sealed tight. Vance appeared behind them. having somehow moved faster than any creature should. "I am afraid you cannot leave yet," he said. "You are our guests now, and I have a task for you, Captain Call. I need you to send a message to your conquered." He handed her a communication device. "Tell them we are still here," Vance said. "Tell them we remember everything." With shaking hands, Call activated the transmitter and began to speak. The message spread across the galaxy like poison in water. Call's voice reached every conquered station, every military outpost, every world that had forgotten the name of humanity. She spoke the words Vance had given her, and she felt the galaxy tremble with each syllable. "This is Captain Yeneth Call of the salvage vessel Quiet Prophet. I am aboard a human ship in the dead corridor. They are awake. They remember everything. They are coming." When the transmission ended, Call collapsed against the wall. Her crew huddled around her, too frightened to speak. Vance stood nearby, watching them with those black and empty eyes. "Well done, Captain," he said. "Now we wait." The Prometheus had fully awakened around them. Lights blazed in every corridor. Machines hummed with ancient power. And throughout the ship, the sound of pods opening echoed like thunder. Call watched as the contingency soldiers emerged from their long sleep. They moved in perfect silence, thousands of them flooding the corridors. Each one wore the same black suit as Vance. Each one had those same hollow eyes. They did not speak or laugh or show any emotion at all. They simply assembled and waited for orders. "How many of you are there?" Dren asked, his voice barely a whisper. "On this ship, 12,043, Vance replied. "Across the fleet, nearly 1 million. We are what remains of the human race." 1 million. Call felt her legs weaken at the number. 1 million soldiers who could not be killed, who had been engineered to destroy every species in the conquered. And they had been sleeping beneath the stars all this time, waiting for this moment. A voice suddenly filled the ship, calm, female, and utterly inhuman. "Return protocol activated. All contingency vessels responding. Fleet assembly will be complete in 72 standard hours." "That is Mother," Vance explained. "Our ship intelligence. She has been watching over us since the beginning, keeping our bodies preserved and our minds intact. She is very fond of us." "Your ship talks?" Savith asked, his scales turning even paler. "Mother does much more than talk," Vance said. "She coordinates our fleet, manages our systems, and ensures that our mission will be completed. She has been planning this day for 3,000 years. The voice of Mother spoke again. "Commander Vance, I am detecting conquered military transmissions. They are mobilizing forces toward the dead corridor. Estimated arrival in 96 standard hours." "They are faster than I expected," Vance admitted, "but not fast enough. By the time they arrive, we will be long gone." "Gone where?" Call demanded. "What do you want? Revenge? Destruction? What could possibly satisfy creatures like you after 3,000 years?" Vance turned to face her, and for a moment that terrible smile faded. Something almost human appeared in his expression, weariness, perhaps, or grief so old it had become a part of him. "We want the truth," he said. "The conquered buried our history. They erased us from the records and made it forbidden to speak our name. Generations have grown up not knowing we ever existed. We want the galaxy to remember what was done to us." He began walking, and Call followed despite herself. He led her to an observation deck where massive windows revealed the stars beyond. Other ships were visible now, gray shapes emerging from the darkness, each one as massive as the Prometheus. "There is an archive on the capital world of Serenes," Vance continued. "The Archive of Silence, they call it. It contains the true record of the First War, every order to attack our colonies, every plan to develop the bioweapon, every celebration when they thought we were extinct. The conquered hid it away, hoping no one would ever learn the truth." "You want to expose them," Call realized. "We want justice," Vance corrected. "The species that ordered our genocide are still praised as heroes. They are called the Noble Seven, the founders of galactic peace. But their hands are covered in the blood of billions, and no one remembers the dead. More ships appeared, their lights blinking on like eyes opening after a long sleep. Call counted 10, then 20, then lost track as they emerged from every shadow in the sector. The contingency fleet was assembling, and it was terrifying to behold. "What happens after you expose the truth?" Call asked. "Will you destroy them? Will you do to the conquered what they did to you?" Vance was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet and strange. "I do not know," he admitted. "We were built for war, we were designed to destroy, but destruction is all we have known for so long. Sometimes I wonder if we are capable of anything else." He turned to face her, and Call saw something unexpected in those black eyes, something like hope, fragile and uncertain. "Perhaps that is why we need witnesses," he said. "Perhaps that is why we kept you alive. You can see us as we are. You can remind us of what we might choose to become." Before Call could respond, Mother's voice filled the deck. "Commander, the fleet is assembled. 67 vessels reporting ready. All contingency soldiers are awake and prepared, awaiting your orders." Vance straightened his shoulders and became a commander again. The moment of vulnerability vanished, replaced by cold and terrible purpose. "Set course for Serenes," he ordered. "Maintain formation. Do not engage any conquered vessels unless they attack first. We will give them time to gather their forces. We will let them watch us come. Fear is a weapon too, and we have 3,000 years of it to deliver." The fleet began to move. Call felt the Prometheus vibrate beneath her feet as its engines fired for the first time in millennia. Through the windows, she watched 67 ships of the dead race forward toward the heart of the galaxy. "What will happen to my crew?" she asked. "You will stay with us until this is over," Vance replied. "You will see the truth with your own eyes. And then, if we have any mercy left in us, you will be free to tell the galaxy what you witnessed." He walked away, leaving Kal alone with the stars. She stared at the fleet of ghost ships moving through the darkness, and she wondered if she was watching the end of everything she knew, or the beginning of something she could not yet understand. The capital world of Serenes had never known such chaos. The great assembly chamber echoed with the screams of 1,000 delegates from every species in the conquered. They had all heard the transmission. They had all seen the reports of ghost ships moving through the dead corridor, and now they were terrified. "This must be a mistake," shouted one delegate, his feathers ruffling with panic. "The humans are extinct. They have been gone for 3,000 years." "The readings do not lie," another replied. 67 vessels, nearly 1 million soldiers. They are headed directly for us." High Chancellor Morath sat in his elevated seat and said nothing. He was ancient even by the standards of his long-lived species, his scales gray and his eyes clouded with age. But his mind remained sharp, and his memory stretched back further than anyone knew. He remembered the First War. He remembered the humans. Morath had been young when the war ended, barely old enough to serve on his first ship. He had watched the final battles from a distance, seen the human worlds burn, celebrated with his people when the bioweapon did its terrible work. He had believed they were saving the galaxy from a dangerous threat. But then he had seen what humanity became in their final days. He had seen the contingency soldiers rise from the ashes of their dying race, transformed into something that could not be killed. He had seen his own fleet torn apart by creatures that felt no pain and knew no fear. The conquered had won the war only because the humans chose to stop fighting. They had retreated into the dead corridor and vanished, taking their terrible fleet with them. And the founders had buried the truth, erased history, and hoped that silence would protect them forever. Now that silence was breaking. "High Chancellor," a delegate demanded, "you must speak. What do we do?" Morath rose slowly from his seat. The chamber fell silent as every eye turned to him. 3,000 years ago, he began, his voice heavy with age and guilt, our ancestors committed a great crime. We attacked the humans without provocation. We feared their potential, and so we tried to destroy them. When conventional weapons failed, we created a plague that killed billions of innocent beings. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Many delegates had never heard this history. The humans should have died, Morath continued. But they did not. They transformed themselves into something that could survive anything we threw at them. They became the contingency, living weapons designed to punish us for what we did. And now they are awake. Then we must fight, shouted a military commander. We have the largest fleet in galactic history. We can crush them. Morath shook his head. You do not understand. The contingency soldiers were engineered to defeat us. They carry the biological advantages of every species that attacked humanity. They cannot be starved or exhausted. They feel no pain and need no sleep. They adapt to every weapon we use against them. We cannot win this war through force. Then what do? The delegate asked, his voice breaking with fear. We pray, Morath said. We pray that they have come seeking justice rather than extinction. Meanwhile, aboard the Prometheus, Kal was learning more about the creatures she had awakened. She sat in the ship's archive room, watching records that had been preserved for millennia. The files showed humanity before the war, beautiful cities, laughing children, artists and scientists and dreamers. They had been so full of life, so eager to explore the stars and make friends among the species they discovered. Then the war began, and everything changed. Kal watched footage of human colonies burning. She saw mothers holding their children as the bioweapon claimed them. She heard the screams of a dying species and felt tears running down her face. You are crying, Vance observed, appearing beside her. Why? Because this is terrible, Kal answered. Because my people helped do this, because I never knew. Vance sat down next to her, his black eyes fixed on the screen. We did not show you this to cause pain. We showed you so that you would understand. We are not monsters who rose from nowhere. We are the result of what was done to us. But what you became, Kal said carefully, is that not also monstrous? Vance considered the question. Perhaps. We sacrificed our humanity to survive. We gave up everything that made us who we were, love, joy, the ability to grow old and die peacefully. We became tools of vengeance because it was the only option left to us. Do you regret it? The silence stretched for a long moment. When Vance finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Every day, every hour of every day for 3,000 years, we preserved our memories, you see. We remember what it felt like to be human. We remember warmth and laughter and the touch of loved ones. And we know that we will never feel those things again. He turned to face her, and Kal saw the depth of his grief. We are hollow, Captain. We exist because we cannot die. We move forward because we have no other direction. This mission is all we have left, the only purpose that keeps us from losing ourselves completely. When it is over, I do not know what will become of us. You could try to rebuild, Kal suggested. You could find a new purpose. Can a weapon become something other than what it was forged to be? Vance asked. Can we unlearn 3,000 years of waiting in the dark? I do not have the answer. I am not sure anyone does. The ship suddenly shuddered as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Through the windows, Kal saw a massive planet surrounded by rings of orbital stations, Serenes, the heart of the conquered. And between the contingency fleet and that world, 10,000 ships waited in formation. They have gathered their entire military, Vance observed. Every species, every vessel they could muster. It is impressive. It will not be enough, will it? Kal asked. Vance smiled that terrible smile. No, but we will give them the chance to understand. We will offer them a choice before the battle begins. Whether they take it or not, that is up to them. He stood and adjusted his uniform. Come, Captain, you wanted to witness history. Now you shall see how it ends. or how it begins again. The two fleets faced each other in the shadow of Serenes, 67 ships of the dead against 10,000 vessels of the living. Kal stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and watched the standoff unfold. The conquered fleet was vast and colorful, ships of every design from every species. But the contingency fleet was cold and silent, gray shapes that seemed to absorb the light of the distant stars. Vance stepped forward and opened a channel to broadcast across all frequencies. "People of the conquered," he began, his voice carrying across the void. "I am Commander Elias Vance of the Human Contingency Division. 3,000 years ago, your ancestors tried to destroy my species. They failed. We are still here, and we remember everything." The conquered fleet shifted nervously, weapons charged and shields activated. "We have not come for revenge," Vance continued. "We have come for truth. On your capital world in the archive of silence lies the record of what was done to us. Every crime, every atrocity, every attempt to erase us from history. We will take that archive. We will broadcast its contents to every corner of the galaxy. The truth will be known." He paused, letting his words sink in. "You have two choices. Stand aside and let us complete our mission, and we will leave in peace. Or fight us and learn why your ancestors feared us enough to commit genocide." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the conquered fleet opened fire. Kal had never seen anything like the battle that followed. The contingency ships moved with impossible speed, dodging missiles and energy beams that should have torn them apart. Their weapons struck with devastating precision, disabling rather than destroying, crippling ships without killing their crews. But it was the boarding actions that truly showed what the contingency soldiers could do. Kal watched on the tactical display as pods launched from the Prometheus and attached to enemy vessels. The soldiers stormed aboard and tore through defenders like shadows through fog. They moved too fast to track, struck too hard to resist, and shrugged off wounds that would have killed any normal creature. "Why are they not killing everyone?" Kal asked. "They could destroy the entire fleet." "Because we are not here to exterminate," Vance replied. "We are here to remind. There is a difference." The battle lasted less than an hour. When it ended, the conquered fleet drifted in pieces, disabled but not destroyed. Thousands of ships floated helplessly as the contingency fleet passed through them and descended toward Serenes. Kal watched Vance during the combat. She expected triumph, satisfaction, perhaps even joy, but she saw none of those things. His face remained empty, his movements mechanical. He fought without passion, killed without pleasure, a weapon fulfilling its purpose, nothing more. And somehow, that emptiness was more frightening than any rage could have been. The Prometheus landed near the Great Assembly Building. Contingency soldiers poured out and secured the area while Vance led a team inside. Kal followed, unable to look away from the history unfolding before her. They found the archive of silence deep beneath the assembly chamber, a vast room filled with data cores that contained the truth of the First War. Vance accessed the systems and began broadcasting everything to the galaxy. Kal watched the faces of the conquered delegates as they saw the records for the first time. She saw shock turn to horror, horror turn to shame. They witnessed their ancestors planning genocide, celebrating the deaths of billions, erasing an entire species from history. The Noble Seven were revealed as the architects of the greatest crime the galaxy had ever known. And then something unexpected happened. As the records played, another file appeared, one that Vance had not selected. It contained images and sounds from before the war, from the time when humanity still hoped for friendship with the stars. Children singing, artists painting, families gathering for meals, lovers holding hands beneath alien suns. "What is this?" Vance demanded, his composure cracking for the first time. "Mother, I did not authorize this broadcast." "I know," came a voice from behind him. Vance spun around to find Kal standing at a terminal, her fingers on the controls. I accessed your archives, she explained. I found the files you preserved, not just your military records but your cultural ones, your music, your art, your stories, everything you were before they made you into weapons. The broadcast spread across the galaxy. Billions of beings watched as the truth of the war was followed by the truth of humanity, not monsters but dreamers, not conquerors but explorers, a species that had wanted nothing more than to belong and had been destroyed for that simple wish. On the bridge of the Prometheus, contingency soldiers stopped their work. They stood frozen as sounds they had not heard in 3,000 years filled the air. Human laughter, human songs, human voices speaking words of love and hope. Vance stared at the screens with those black and empty eyes, but something was changing in his face. The hollowness cracked, and beneath it, Call glimpsed the ghost of the man he had once been. "Why," he whispered, "why would you do this?" "Because you needed to remember," Call answered. "Not just what was done to you, but who you were before. You were not always weapons. You were people. And somewhere beneath everything they turned you into, that humanity still exists." Vance looked at his soldiers, his brothers and sisters in suffering, the last remnants of a murdered race. They stood motionless, overwhelmed by memories of lives they had sacrificed to survive. "We cannot go back," he said. "We can never be what we were." "No," Call agreed. "But you can choose what you become next. Revenge is for the living, you told me. Well, so is forgiveness, so is hope. You preserved your memories for a reason, Commander. Perhaps this is it, not to fuel your vengeance, but to remind you what is worth fighting for." The silence stretched for an eternity. Then Vance did something Call had never seen him do. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, the blackness seemed slightly less complete. A flicker of warmth appeared in those depths, tiny and fragile but real. "Stand down," he ordered his soldiers. "The mission is complete, the truth is known." Call watched as the contingency fleet powered down its weapons. The battle was over, not in genocide, but in something she had no name for. Acknowledgement, perhaps. Recognition of wounds that could never fully heal but might finally be allowed to scar. Days later, the fleet departed for the outer reaches of the galaxy. Vance stood with Call at the airlock before she returned to her own ship. "We will not integrate into your society," he told her. "We are too changed, too broken, but we will no longer be your nightmares either. We will find a place in the dark where we can exist without causing harm." "Is that enough?" Call asked. "After everything?" Vance almost smiled. Not the terrible smile he had worn before, but something gentler and infinitely sadder. "We were humanity's last weapon," he said. "But you reminded us that we are also humanity's last memory. Perhaps preserving that memory is purpose enough. Perhaps being the proof that we existed, that we loved and dreamed and hoped, is worth more than any revenge." He stepped back into his ship, and the airlock closed between them. Call watched the Prometheus vanish into the darkness of space. She thought about the creatures she had awakened, not monsters but mirrors, reflections of what cruelty could create and what compassion might still redeem. They were gone now, the last humans, but the galaxy would never forget them again. And that, she realized, was the truest victory of all.